What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. I am the Hobbyist, and today I want to do a little bit of an update on my Losi Tenacity rally car build. There have been some changes and there's some modifications that I think that are quite interesting I wanted to show you guys. So without further ado, let's take the body off and get a closer look. So starting off with some basic stuff, I did put a fan on the motor because the motor was getting a little hot, and I did do a short about that. I also mentioned that I had to gear down from the 16 tooth to a 14 tooth because there just wasn't enough torque from this motor in order to get it going and getting the wheels to spin. Another thing that I have noticed is that the front springs have gotten pretty soft. I think that's just because the springs are still the original springs and the extra compression has made them a little bit old. But that's actually surprisingly worked out. The rear ones are still nice and firm, but these front ones being softer, they actually absorb a little bit of the bumps in the road, and I found that that actually helps handling much better than the firmer front suspension did. One problem I have noticed, if you guys remember, I put 100,000 weight diff fluid, I think maybe it was CST diff fluid, in the rear differential to try and firm it up a little bit. However, I think I have damaged the spider gear housing in this rear differential because when I hit the brakes really hard, it makes a very bad clicking sound. Now, I have not opened it up, but that's just something that I believe it is because I checked the gears and the gears are fine on both differentials. And I know it's not the front one because it's only happening to the rear, and I've checked and I've rotated it, and I know it is the rear differential that is doing it. So that is something that I'm gonna have to take apart and put in a new diff or spider gear housing if that is the case. The final and probably most obvious modification is I have put in Underglow lighting. Now, these lights were originally for my Axial SCX 10-3 as interior lights, but they were just way too bright and they just didn't look realistic at all. So I removed them and I had them lying around, so I figured I'd rig them up to this and get a really cool underglow effect. Now, I did find a few problems with this. The first of which being that when I plugged it into the receiver, as you usually do with lights, when I hit the throttle, it resulted in the lights flickering. And I think that's because of the amp draw of the motor was just too high, and the internal BEC of this electronic speed controller, this is the original Dynamite Fuse 130 amp speed controller, just could not supply enough power to really keep the lights very bright. So a solution to that was I gave it its own power source. This is the original AA pack that came out of my Traxxas T-Max a while ago, and I had it lying around, so I soldered up the switch to be shorter and I rigged it up so that it would plug into the opposing servo port, and when you flick this switch, the lights come on. And these are very bright, and since they're on their own power source, they're not going to flicker or do anything when I hit the throttle. Now, if you've noticed this crazy rubber band GRA rig, this is to allow me to be able to remove the battery pack when these AA's die. Now, I don't do a lot of night running, so I don't expect them to die anytime soon, but I still wanted to make it easy to connect them. So as a result, what I've done is I've rigged up a few rubber bands, the first one being in the back here on a screw that wraps around the outer border of the pack, and then one that goes around the center chassis rail, and it's hooked up by this screw with a nut on it as a little bit of a locking nut kind of thing. And by this I can immediately just unhook these, and I can have easy access to removing the battery connector. I can unplug it and completely pull it out of the vehicle and change out the batteries. So so far I haven't driven it a ton with this system, but so far it has been very sturdy. I mean, I can lift the car just by the battery pack, so it's in there very securely. So that's the underglow lights, and for a rally car I thought it looked really cool. Another thing that I ended up having to do is you see this Lexan that's all zip tied to the body mounts. So these were cut up axial body mounts that I used because the body that was originally on here was a truggy body, and the body mounts obviously didn't fit. I needed really tall body mounts to fit that large Lancia Delta Integrale body. So I did that, and they were very wiggly. And you could very clearly see every time it hit a bump on the road, the back of the body would shake, and it just looked horrible. So me and my dad came up with this idea where we have this piece of Lexan that is zip tied to the bottom rail and then up here. Now it's not perfect, as you can see, it can still flex. However, with the body on, it is much firmer than it was. So if you've been following along with this build and trying to do something similar, I recommend either doing this or you find another way to connect these two body mounts together so that they're nice and firm. So another quick thing that I had to do is up front right here, you can see that I'm using a crawler style servo horn, and that's because this servo is not very fast. It's more torque. It's Park HD 20 kg Metal Gear servo. But I noticed that it was kind of slow, and for a road car I definitely wanted it to be faster. So I got a longer servo horn. I have a bunch of these lying around from my crawler servos, and I put that on there and adjusted the endpoints accordingly, and now it's actually relatively quick. It's definitely nowhere near the speed of the Savox that's running in my race truck, but it's better than it was, and any improvement is a good one. So now you've seen everything under the body that I've changed. Let me show you one thing on the body itself that I changed. If you look right here, this wing right here, I originally had it glued on and it just kept breaking off. I had this with my friends the other day, and they both tried to pick up the body and they both broke off the wing by accident. So what I ended up doing is reaming some holes and using some really thin and small stainless steel screws, and I screwed it into this Lexan piece right here. There are no nuts behind it. I originally was going to, but the way I reamed it, it resulted in enough of the Lexan being left right here that I could just screw it into the Lexan, and now it's nice and firm and I don't have to worry about that falling off anymore. For those of you who are wondering how big this rig is, it's considered 1/8 scale because that's how big the body is, although it is a 1/10 scale platform. But for size comparison, here's a cat, pretty big little dude. He's a kitten, so that just gives you an idea. Although he is a pretty big kitten, he's about that size. So there's the most ineffective size comparison you'll ever see. And in the case of this cat, he also likes to park himself right next to my buggy. So, say hello to the cat. Anyway guys, hopefully you enjoyed this update on what has been going on with the Losi Tenacity rally car. I got a lot of feedback on Reddit. A lot of people were very interested in seeing how this project progressed. So here's a little update. So thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment in the section below for what videos you'd like to see next. But that's all for today, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.